Good day, everyone. My name is Jean Candice Inting. We are the Group 3, and welcome to this webinar on historical foundations of education. So, from the dawn of civilization, humans have sought to pass on knowledge and skills to future generations. And the foundation of education, laid in the midst of prehistory and nurtured by ancient civilization, have shaped the very essence of learning as we know it today. This report delves into the fascinating journey of education, tracing its roots from primitive societies to the rise of formal systems in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Chinese, Hindu, and Rome. We will explore the diverse forms of knowledge transmission, the evolving purpose of education, and the impact of pivotal innovations like writing on the dissemination of ideas. And by understanding the origins of education, we gain valuable insights into the enduring values and challenges that continue to shape learning in our own time. So before we begin to our lesson for today, allow me first to read to you the lesson objectives. First is to identify and describe key educational practices and philosophies from ancient civilization to the Roman period. Next is to appreciate the influence of ancient educational systems on contemporary education practices. So to start, let me have the privilege to bring you back through time with this report. So on this slide, do you happen to recognize the picture collage? I'm sure some of you here are familiar with these photos. Now for your reference, kindly look at the picture from the top left corner of your screen to the right. So the first picture from the top left corner is the portrait statue of Augustus of Primaporta. So Augustus is the first Roman emperor during the Roman civilization, and this is dated from around 1st century AD. Now the second picture from the left is a soldier from the terracotta army of Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang is the first emperor of China. So it has believed that this has existed from around 210 to 209 BCE. Now the third picture from the left is a mask of Tutankhamun. So this is the death mask. It is one of the best known works of art in ancient Egypt. This is a prominent symbol of ancient Egypt civilization. And it has believed that it existed from around 1323 BC. Now, the fourth picture from the top right corner of your screen is the portrait sculpture of Venus de Milo, or the Aphrodite of Melos. So it has become one of the most famous works of ancient Greek civilization. Again, this is a marble sculpture of Venus from ancient Greek civilization. And the fifth picture from the bottom left corner of your screen is the Standard of Ore. So this is a Sumerian artifact. It is actually a hollow wooden box. It comes from the ancient city of Ur, now what we call the country of Iraq. And this is believed to be under the possession of the British Museum, and it is around 4,600 years old. And the last picture is the Praised King. This is a sculpture of Praised King. It is dated from around 2000 to 1900 BCE. And it is under the National Museum in Pakistan in Karachi. So again, these photos here are well-known ancient artworks. So each representing a certain civilization. So these are remnants of ancient civilization that have shaped the very essence of humanity. Now, to dig deeper into this report, let's visit the primitive societies. So again, the first picture is Augustus of Primaporta from 1st century AD. This is under the Roman civilization. Second picture is a soldier from terracotta army of Qin Shi Huang. and existed around 210 to 209 BC from ancient China. And the third picture is a mask of Tutankhamun around 1323 BC from ancient civilization of Egypt. So the fourth picture here is Venus de Milo of 160 to 110 BC, and this is from the Greek civilization. And the fifth picture is a standard of ore. It is believed that it is now around 4,600 years old from the ancient Sumerian civilization. And the last picture is the priest king. It is a sculpture of priest king from around 2000 to 1900 BC from the ancient Oriental. So turning on to the next slide is primitive education. So primitive education, this encompasses the earliest forms of learning passed down through generations in pre-literate societies. Now think about how knowledge was transmitted through oral traditions, rituals, and practical skills. Examples could include hunter-gatherer societies, early agricultural communities, and indigenous cultures. Primitive education, often rooted in oral traditions and practical skills, played a vital role in shaping early societies. So it focused on transmitting essential knowledge and values through storytelling, observation, and hands-on learning. Children learned crucial survival skills like hunting, gathering, and farming, preparing them for their roles within their communities. So this informal education system fostered a deep connection to nature and a strong sense of community, ensuring the survival and prosperity of their people. While lacking formal education, primitive education laid the foundation for the development of more complex educational systems in later civilizations. So now moving on to the next slide, we have primitive education. So primitive societies, their mere focus is on survival skills, preserving their traditions and cultural knowledge. So when we say survival skills, that could include finding natural shelter. So they find shelter through caves, dense trees, and also they've learned to build a fire through hand drill or bow drill. And third is staying warm from the harsh environment, then finding safe water sources, and identifying edible plants to eat, and finding animal food through hunting. So their methods of education were oral transmission, so that's words of mouth, observation from their environment, imitation from their tribe, from their people, from their leaders, from their parents, and also practical demonstration. So that example for that is hunting, gathering techniques, fire making tool, and storytelling, rituals, and social customs. Now their key features is informal. So informal education, since they don't have yet a standardized education, and survival skills, traditions, and cultural knowledge. That's a lifelong learning for them, and it is integrated with their daily life, and it is being passed down through generations from generations. Now, the purpose of education from primitive societies is to shape children to becoming good members of their tribe, and also for training for citizenship. It is essential for them because they are primarily concerned with the growth of individuals as tribe members. So again, there's two types of primitive education. First is practical, so that includes the simple forms of domestic, vocational, physical, moral, and military training. So again, practical focus on applying skills. So that could include hunting, gathering, basic forms of farming, finding shelter, finding food to eat, and staying warm. And for theoretical, that covers the religious, like the rituals, musical, like chanting, and literary. So turning on to the next slide, we have the Oriental education. Now, Oriental education encompasses the Sumerian, Egyptian, Jewish, Chinese, and Hindu. So together we're going to visit the Sumerian education. The ancient Sumerians. Ancient Sumerians have existed around 4500 BCE. The ancient Sumerians, pioneers of civilization in Mesopotamia, developed a sophisticated educational system that laid the groundwork for later Oriental education. Their schools, known as houses of tablets, emphasized literacy and numeracy, teaching students to read, write, and perform calculations using cuneiform scripts. These institutions also imparted knowledge of law, religion, and astronomy, preparing individuals for roles in government, priesthood, and other professions. The Sumerian educational system was renowned for its rigorous curriculum and its focus on developing critical thinking skills, fostering a culture of intellectual inquiry and advancement. Their innovations in education left a lasting legacy, influencing educational practices throughout the ancient world and beyond. So, the Sumerians is the oldest recorded civilization known to man, and their civilization, some believed to have started around 4500 BC. The Sumerians is presently called Iraq, and the Sumerians also invented the cuneiform writing, so later became the modern day alphabet system, which we are still using right now. It's still prevalent. And the Sumerians also were the first to advocate individual freedom. So here in Sumerian civilization, the writing was already been established. So they already have a writing system. It is a cuneiform writing and it is written on tablets. So the Sumerian education. So the first to develop the school system known to man is the Sumerians. So schools were called Eduba, or the tablet house, as the teaching and writing were in tablets. So by the way, tablets are made up of dried clay, so that's what they use for their writings, the cuneiform writing. And the students were called school sons. So based on the picture here, it can be seen that the students were all boys. So during the Sumerian civilization, the boys are the only privileged to go to schools, or the boys coming from the elite families. So the girls are not given privilege and education. They are only in charge to domestic care. And the Sumerians were the first to adopt alumni-alumnus system. And also, they were the first to introduce the science and arts streams. So, turning on to the next slide, we have here the Egyptians. So, the Egyptian civilization started around 3100 BCE. Now, the ancient Egyptian education, a cornerstone of their civilization, was deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs and social structure. So children from elite families receive instruction in houses of life, where they learned reading, writing, mathematics, and the principles of their complex religious system. So this education emphasized on practical skills alongside moral and ethical values, preparing individuals for roles in government, priesthood, and the military. So scribes trained in these institutions played a vital role in recording history, administering justice, and preserving knowledge, so contributing to the enduring legacy of ancient Egyptian civilization. While education was primarily reserved for the privileged, the emphasis on literacy, knowledge contributed to the sophisticated and enduring culture of ancient Egypt. Egyptian education. Ancient Egyptians passed down knowledge more often than not to male students. So just like the Sumerians, Egyptians here only gave priority or importance to male students in terms of education, while girls are in charge for domestic care. So education is focused on training to becoming a scribe. So a scribe is responsible for recording and preserving information. So its job is to document official records, creating literature, and recording historical events. And the picture here is an example of a papyrus. So Egyptians were the first to invent papers. So that's what they use for their writings. And the writings are called hieroglyphics. So again, if the Sumerians have their cuneiform scripts, Egyptians also here have their hieroglyphics, and they write it in paper. Egyptian education focused on practical and empirical methods in equipping individuals with skills for their professions. So one would say empirical, it is based on observation and experiences, while practical, those are skills like farming, craftsmanship, and domestic duties. So the Egyptians have their ancient writing system. It is called hieroglyphics, and they also have ancient paper, which is also called the papyrus. So in the subject mathematics, the Egyptians were the first to compute the value of pi, which is 3.16, and the pyramids of Giza are among the most recognizable symbol of ancient Egyptian civilization in terms of engineering and architecture. And in geometry, Egyptians were the first to develop a sophisticated methods for land surveying and measuring, which is essential for maintaining their agricultural economy and managing their vast territories. So they use ropes, measuring rods, and geometric principles to calculate areas and divide land. And in astronomy, they used their knowledge to create a calendar based on the cycles of the sun, the stars, and the heavenly bodies. And in terms of medicine, they were the first to explore the human anatomy in a form of mummification. The Jewish. The Jewish civilization started around 1800 to 1250 BCE. So ancient Jewish education, deeply rooted in tradition, emphasized the importance of teaching children from a young age. So the commandment to teach your children was central to the Jewish life, and the emphasis on literacy in the study of religious texts was paramount. This dedication to education, particularly the study of the Torah, shaped the Jewish people's identity and helped them preserve their culture throughout history. The Jewish education. So, the focus of education during the Jewish civilization is religious centered. So, the term Talmud, it is a method of study for the Jewish, and rabbis serves as teachers and priests. So the picture on the right corner of your screen, those are rabbis. So they serves as some teachers, priests, and tutors. So Jews established their own schools or hired private tutors for their children until the end of the 18th century. So just like the previous civilization, the Jewish civilization also gave importance only to male students in terms of education, while girls are for domestic care. And schools were housed in annexes or separate buildings close to the synagogue. So, synagogue is a place for worship or prayer for the Jewish people. So, still on Jewish education, they have Torah study. It is the core of the Jewish education, encompassing the written Torah or the five books of Moses, and the oral Torah later codified in the Mishnah and Talmud. So, Mishnah, it is a compilation of oral laws and interpretation, which is very important from the Jewish people. And Talmud, it is a vast collection of rabbinic discussions in the Mishnah, which also became essential texts for advanced study. And Hebrew literacy, developing fluency in Hebrew was crucial for understanding religious texts and participating in synagogue services. So, the Jewish civilization uses Hebrew as their official language. and memorizing key passages and prayers was an important part of the learning process. So again, the Jewish civilization is religious centered. So therefore, internalizing religious teaching and key passages and prayers were highlighted in the Jewish education. The Chinese civilization started around 2070 to 1600 BCE. So ancient Chinese education, a cornerstone for their civilization for millennia, was deeply intertwined with Confucian philosophy and social structure. So from the earliest dynasties, education focused on cultivating moral character, transmitting knowledge through classic texts, and preparing individuals for roles in government and society. So this encompasses some literacy, ethics, and respect for tradition, lay the foundation for a sophisticated and enduring culture that valued learning and intellectual pursuits. So while education was initially reserved for the elite, the development of the imperial examination system in later dynasties provided a path for social mobility, allowing talented individuals to rise to position of power and influence. The legacy of ancient Chinese education continues to shape educational practices in China and beyond, emphasizing the importance of moral development, intellectual rigor, and the pursuit of knowledge for the betterment of society. So, moving on to Chinese education, it can be observed that from the start of the Oriental civilization, from ancient Sumerians, the boys were the only ones given more priority in terms of education, while girls are only for domestic care and duties. So the boys learned about government, religion, war, as well as important ceremonies in their culture, music, and how to drive a chariot. So the Chinese education focused on Confucianism. So Confucianism is actually not a religion in the traditional sense, but it is a complex and multifaceted system of thought or a way of life, wherein it focused on social harmony. And also, the methods of study under the Chinese civilization were imperial academics. So, when we say empirical, it's still based on observation and experiences. And they still hire private tutors for their male students coming from the elite families. And they were the first to have the standardized exams, which is the civil service exams. And the key texts under the Chinese civilization were Confucian classics, Analects. Analects is the most important of Confucius' teachings, providing insights into his philosophy and ethical principles, and the books of Mencius. So Mencius is a Chinese philosopher and the most important follower of Confucius. So the key features for their education were emphasis on moral character, their social responsibility, and the pursuit of knowledge for the betterment of society. Chinese civilization have established two types of education. So they already have the public and private school system. So the public school system or the official school education, it is sponsored by central and local governments of slave and feudal societies, while the private school education, it is first initiated by Confucius in the spring and autumn period around 770 to 476 BC. So it prospered during the Wei and Jin dynasties. So again, the two types of education under the Chinese civilization were the official school education and private school education. Hindu. The Hindu civilization started around 3300 to 500 BCE. So ancient Hindu education, deeply rooted in the Vedic tradition, emphasized spiritual and moral development alongside practical skills. So from the earliest times, Knowledge was passed down through oral traditions, with students learning from gurus and engaging in rigorous debates and discussions. So the focus was on understanding the Vedas, the sacred text, and applying their principles to daily life, fostering a deep connection to the divine and a strong sense of dharma or duty. Education was considered a lifelong pursuit, with individuals striving to attain liberation or the moksha through knowledge and spiritual growth. While education was largely confined to the upper castes, the emphasis on moral values and intellectual inquiry contributed to the development of a rich and diverse intellectual tradition in ancient India. So, the focus of education during the Hindu civilization is more on Vedic scriptures, religious rituals, and the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. So, Vedic scriptures are a collection of ancient Sanskrit texts, which is considered sacred in Hinduism. And their methods of study is through residential schools from Gurukulas, and it is also a family-based instruction. So it means that their teachers or their elders, their leaders, or it could be their parents. And the method is oral transmission, um, estab- uh, despite being able to establish writings already. They still use oral transmission or the words of mouth. Key texts were Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. So Vedas, that means some knowledge or revelation in Sanskrit. And Upanishads, it is a philosophical text that explore the nature of reality, the soul, and the divine. And Bhagavad Gita, it is a song of God, and it offers a profound insight into spirituality, philosophy, ethics, and the nature of reality. Ancient Greek civilization started around 2700 to 800 BCE. So, ancient Greek education, a cornerstone of their civilization, was deeply intertwined with their philosophical and cultural values. So, from the earliest times, education focused on developing well rounded individuals, known as kalos kagathos, who were both physically and mentally capable. So, boys from elite families receive instruction in various disciplines, including reading, writing, mathematics, music, and physical training. So, preparing them for their active citizenship and participation in public life. So, the emphasis on rhetoric, logic, and critical thinking, as exemplified by the teachings of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, laid the foundation of Western philosophical thought and intellectual inquiry. So, while education was primarily reserved for males and the wealthy, the innovations in pedagogy and philosophy developed ancient Greece had a profound and lasting impact on educational practices throughout the world. So, the Greek education. So, Greek education focused more on intellectual development. So, intellectual development aimed for the development of the kalos kagathos, or the wise and the good men. So, that means that nurturing both the mind and the body. And they also advocate for physical fitness. So, physical fitness was highly valued, with training in wrestling, running, and combat sport taking place at the gymnasium, and also for citizenship training. And their methods were in gymnasia, palaestras, it's their wrestling schools, and also during the Greek education, they still hired private tutors for the elite students coming from the rich, important families. So also, same on the previous civilization, it's still the boys who were given most priority on education. And their key figures were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So the three of them profoundly shaped the Athenian education. They were called the triumvirate during the Greek civilization. So Socrates developed the Socratic method, emphasizing questioning and dialogue, while Plato is more on research as the center of learning, and Aristotle developed the philosophical inquiry. And the key features on the Greek education were the emphasis of rhetoric. So when we say rhetoric, that's the ability to persuade and speak eloquently, as it was taught extensively during the Greek civilization, and also emphasize on philosophy, logic, mathematics, and physical education. So that's for the Greek education, focus on holistic development from the mind and the body. Ancient Roman civilization started around 753 to 509 BCE. So ancient Roman education, heavily influenced by Greek models, evolved from informal family-based learning to a more structured system during the Republic and Empire. So formal schools, often taught by Greek tutors, emphasize literacy, rhetoric, and the study of classical literature, preparing individuals for roles in government, law, and public life. So while primarily focused on boys from elite families, Roman education also included practical skills, military training, and a strong emphasis on moral values, fostering a sense of civic duty and responsibility. The Roman system, though unequal in its access, laid the groundwork for later Western educational systems, emphasizing the importance of eloquence, logic, and a well-rounded education. Despite its limitation, Roman education played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual and cultural landscape of the ancient world. Roman education focused on practical skills necessary for citizenship. So that includes reading, writing, arithmetic, law, and military training. And military skills were still essential for Roman citizens, and boys received training in combat and strategy. And the methods of study were in public schools, or what they call the Ludus Literarios, and the formal schools were already established, offering a more structured curriculum. And they still hire private tutors for the boys coming from the elite families. And they also have rhetorical schools. So rhetorical schools is still prevalent during the Roman civilization. Rectors still taught students the art of public speaking, persuasion, and argumentation. And the key figures in Roman civilization were Cicero and Quintilian. So Cicero made significant contributions to the understanding of rhetoric and education, and he was a renowned Roman orator. He's a statesman and philosopher, and known for his eloquent speech, often addressed political and social issues of his time. While Quintilian was a Roman educator and rhetorician known for his comprehensive work on Institutio Oratorio, he emphasized the importance of character in oratory and arguing that a good orator must be virtuous and trustworthy to be persuasive. And the key features under the Roman civilization were the emphasis on Latin literature, law, public speaking, and military training. So, Latin was the language of administration, law, and literature, and all Roman students learned the Latin language. Based on this webinar, we have come to understand the historical foundations of education during the primitive up until the Roman period, and it provides valuable insights into the evolution of learning and its relationship to society, since education and society goes hand in hand. So it helps us appreciate the diverse ways in which people have sought to acquire knowledge, cultivate skills, and prepare themselves for the challenges and opportunities of their time. So again, we owe debt of gratitude to ancient civilizations for their contributions to education and the pursuit of knowledge. They laid the groundwork for many of the educational principles and practices that we still value today. So at this point, I want you to reflect on the following questions. So, what do you think is the role of education in the rise of human civilization? And how did education evolve over time? So, this is supposed to be a reflective question right after the discussion. But since this is a recorded webinar, so kindly answer this in a one half sheet of paper. So again, the question, what do you think is the role of education in the rise of human civilization? And second is, how did education evolve over time? From this webinar, we have come to understand how education have evolved over time and that ancient civilizations are not vulnerable towards the challenges in terms of education. So they actually faced challenges in terms of access and social class. So education was primarily reserved for the elite and with access often determined by social status and wealth. Next is the limited opportunities for girls. So girls were generally excluded from formal education and their training focused more on domestic skills such as weaving, cooking, and childcare. And this limited access to education hindered their intellectual development and social advancement. And the third one is more on religious influence. So ancient Oriental societies were deeply rooted in religious, and education often served to reinforce religious beliefs and values. Then the lack of standardization. So there was no standardized curriculum or national system of education. So schools varied in the approach or content and quality depending on the teacher, the community, and the student's social status. And oral tradition. So oral tradition remained crucial in transmitting knowledge. So, despite the advancement of the writing system, the oral transmission is still prevalent during the earliest civilization. So, they still use the words of mouth in transmitting information. And the last one is the decline of education in the late Roman Empire. So, as the Roman Empire declined, education faced some challenges from political instability, economic hardships, and the decline of urban life. So schools were closed, teachers were poorly paid, and literacy rates declined. Society progressed over time. The education also evolved. So here are some key trends in education's evolution. So first we have the elite to mass education. So, education has shifted from being primarily accessible to the wealthy to becoming a fundamental right for all citizens. So, from the 20th century, the concept of universal education gained momentum. So, with many countries introducing compulsory education for all children. And so, our country also adapt to that. And also the focus on practical skills. So, education has increasingly emphasized the development of practical skills and knowledge relevant to the workforce. So, education has always been about preparing individuals for the challenges and opportunities of their time. So, the focus on practical skills has been a constant theme throughout history. And technological advancements. So, technology has revolutionized the delivery of education. So, providing learners with greater access to information and personalized learning experiences. So, the internet and digital technologies have revolutionized education. So, offering online courses, virtual classrooms, and personalized learning experiences. And last one is the lifelong learning. So the concept of lifelong learning has become increasingly prevalent, recognizing the need for continuous education throughout one's life. So the evolution of education is a continuous process. So responding to societal needs, technological advancement, and changing perspectives on learning. So these trends highlights the dynamic nature of education and its potential to shape the future of humanity. For the evaluation, I have here a short quiz for you. You can answer this in a one-fourth sheet of paper. For the instruction, you have to write true if the statement is true and false if it's otherwise. Now, these are 10 items in total. So these are the questions from 1 to 5. And the next slide is the 6 to 10. So for your assignment, kindly answer this in a one-half sheet of paper. So you have to give a thoughtful reflections on the strengths and limitations of ancient educational practices, considering their relevance and potential issues in a modern context. So you may pass that on to our next meeting. So once again, this has been your host for today's webinar. My name is Jean Candice Ting, and I will leave you a quote from Socrates. It says, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Good day, everyone, and thank you for your time.